Hey friends, welcome back to the Guitar Max channel and welcome to the viewers of the Produce Like a Pro channel, which I am collaborating with on this incredible video. Today, we are going to get an up-close look at the mysterious third Randy Rhoads Jackson prototype guitar, which was considered lost to public view for nearly 40 years. This is the guitar that was built for Randy Rhoads in 1982, but he tragically died before he ever received it. What's amazing about this guitar is that it is not just the third Rhoads V prototype ever made, but it is even the third Jackson branded guitar ever made. We're going to look at this guitar, we're going to play the guitar, and we're going to reveal the pioneering features of this guitar, which went on to impact hard rock and heavy metal guitars even through today. Even more than that, we get to talk to Sean Clegg, who has been the owner of this guitar since the early 80s. He has finally decided to put the guitar up for auction and let the public see it. All right, now let's look at this incredible piece of heavy metal history. All right, guys, so here it is. This is it. This is the lost Jackson Randy Rhoads guitar. This guitar is amazing. So let me tell you a quick backstory on this. And guys, there's going to be an article that you can check out that I'll put a link to down in the video description below. So basically, this guitar was made for Randy Rhoads, and unfortunately, he died before he was ever able to play it. Now, this was going to be the third guitar that he would get that was from Grover Jackson. And what's incredible about this guitar, not just the connection with Randy Rhoads, but the connection with Jackson Guitars itself. Because here's the thing, at that time, Grover Jackson owned Charvel guitars. He had bought it from Wayne Charvel back in 1978. And so Grover Jackson was making Charvel guitars. But when he started working with Randy Rhoads, this body style was such a departure from the previous Charvel guitars that he'd been making, he wanted to use a different name. And so he put Jackson, he put his own name on it. And this was the third prototype. So this is the third Jackson branded guitar ever. When you think about how big of a brand Jackson Guitars is today and how important that brand became to hard rock and metal music, and this is the third one ever. And this body style was really the first Jackson guitar. Now, there's some really cool differences between this one and the first prototype. If you think back to the Concorde, right? That was really the first offset V, that first Randy Rhoads guitar. But one thing with that is the body and the neck, the way those connect, you had a lot worse fret access on that first version of the guitar. And that was one of the things that Randy asked Grover Jackson if they could change, if they could kind of bring the body kind of further back towards the end of the neck so he could get better fret access. And I got to tell you, this guitar has awesome fret access. I mean, this guitar here is pretty close to what a modern Randy Rhoads Jackson V is like today. And to think they got this back in 1981, 1982. I mean, talk about a good design, right? We are still playing these today and it's largely unchanged. Now, I'm going to tell you about the specs of this guitar in a second here, but there's a couple other crazy things with the backstory of this guitar. So in 1983, at the 1983 NAMM convention, this guitar was accidentally sold. They weren't intending to sell it, it was just on display, but they accidentally sold it to somebody. That guy took it to another guy, who took it to another guy. It eventually got to a guy named Sean Clegg, and that guy realized what it was and basically hid it away, right? He knew how rare this guitar was, and he didn't tell anybody that he owned it. He just sort of secretly kept it. And so to the general public, to everybody, you know, out in the world, this guitar was basically lost. Nobody knew what became of this guitar. This guy, Sean, he held onto it for decades, and now finally today the guitar is up for auction. And if you have, you know, 100 grand, I don't know, maybe 150, I don't know how much this is going to go for, sitting around, and you want an incredible piece of heavy metal history, this guitar can be yours. Okay, so before I go on here, guys, you know, I'm so lucky that I get to play this guitar, and I'm going to do a little playing, little 80s shredding in a second here. But I got to tell you, this video here is kind of half of the overall video, and I really want you guys to check out the other part of the video, which is over on the Produce Like a Pro channel. And Warren has a video over there where he's basically talking about Randy Rhoads and Randy Rhoads riffs and just how incredible of a player and influential he was. And it's a really cool video, and I, with this guitar, am also in that video. So you gotta go check that out. Of course, I'll have a link down in the video description below. Okay, now some quick specs on this guitar. It's a neck-through construction. This looks like a set neck, but it's actually neck-through construction. It's a maple neck, it's mahogany wings, beautiful dark ebony fretboard, 22 frets. These are fairly small frets. These are not like modern extra jumbo frets that you would find on a modern day Jackson guitar, but for the time, you know, these were the standard frets you'd get on a guitar like this. Kind of interesting. I'll put in some close-ups here of this stuff, but it's got the sort of Gibson style fret ends here. Now, the Seymour Duncan pickups, and it's got kind of an interesting control layout. You've got a mini toggle switch, you've got a standard 3-way toggle, which is your pickup selector switch, then you've got a tone and a volume control, and the tone and the volume controls are reversed to what you'd expect. The volume control is actually further away down on the lower horn. Now, one last thing, and again, I'll give you guys a close-up of this, but one last thing that's really cool about this is with the Jackson logo on this. Like I said, this was the third Jackson branded guitar made, so they didn't have decals or anything like that. They hand painted this Jackson logo, and you can see the brush marks in this. I mean, it looks good, right? It looks like it was printed, but somebody painted this by hand. Okay, guys, so now let's do a little shredding on the lost Randy Rhoads guitar. And I should also mention, we are using Zakk Wylde's cab here. So we've got the Randy Rhoads guitar plugged into the Zakk Wylde cab. Now, for an amp, I'm using my REVV G20. I've got a power attenuator, and I've got a Boss Super Overdrive SD1 going into the front of it. It's from 1981, that pedal, so it's period correct pedal. Then I've got just a little bit of delay from a Allen Eden digital delay running in the effects loop. All right, let's check it out, see how this thing sounds. But real quick, guys, if you enjoy videos like this, make sure you're subscribed. All right, guys, let's plug it in and shred. play this guitar, there's a few things that really jump out to me. One is just the overall tone of it and how mid-range focused it is. To me, it actually sounds very much like you would expect a Les Paul of that era to sound. Now, obviously, our amp and cab setup helps to get that tone, but there's something about this guitar. I mean, it's the construction, the scale length, the weight of it. This is a very heavy guitar for a guitar of this style, and yeah, I mean, this thing just shreds. It's got these really beautiful harmonics. That's another thing that jumped out to me, and I think it's because it has such a chopped high-end sound to it. Nothing sounds fizzy, right? And even when you hit the harmonics, they're not piercing. They just have a really sweet, really pure sound to them. Now, there's a few things about this that really impress me when you think about how old this guitar is. One of them is the neck profile on this, because when I grab this guitar, I mean, yeah, the frets feel a little bit different, and you can tell that the guitar is aged somewhat, but the feel and the profile of the neck is not that different than a really nice Jackson Rhoads today. I mean, it's fairly flat on the back of the neck, and it's, the string spacing, the width of the nut, all of that stuff is pretty close to what you'd get on a modern Jackson Rhoads V today. And again, just the fact that they got it right so early on, I mean, it blows my mind, because there's so many companies that, they tweak guitars here and there, and every 2 or 3 years they bring out a new model and they change something about it. But this is one of those guitars that they just got it right after basically the third design. This was the third design, and they really nailed it with this. And the thing I can't help but not wonder about is, Randy was such an incredible player. What are the sort of licks and riffs that he could have come up with if he'd been able to get this guitar in his hands and spend some time with it? Because this is the kind of guitar, the kind of instrument where you really just feel like it gets out of your way. You're free to play the things you want to play, and whatever you can come up with in your head, you can immediately translate out to the guitar. And I just wish that he could have played this guitar and made music with it. Sean.
Buddy.
Dude, man, thanks a ton for doing this, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank
Dude,
you.
so you have been, the owner of this incredible guitar, this piece of history, for what, like 35 years, something
It's
like that?
a little over that, yeah.
Wow.
I don't even want to say how old I am, but I got it when I was 17.
Yeah, wow.
It's been my magic axe for all those years, and it's been well played, but it's time to go on the market, and so here we are.
Well, this, obviously the initial history of this guitar, I think at this point is pretty well known. It was accidentally sold right at NAMM.
Right.
But what was, when you first saw this guitar, right? Like what went through your mind when you saw this and when you realized what it was?
Well, when the guy brought it in to McCabe's guitar shop where I was and told me what it was, I instantly was infatuated. I was already a Randy fan, and as soon as I held it in my hands, I realized that this was something special. I mean, the neck, the action, the playability, the access to the very last fret. These things weren't readily available in the early 80s, as you might know. And so from the moment I played the guitar, I knew it was deeply special. And already having been a Randy fan, I sort of just knew I had to have it. And luckily, I was able to get it, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the guy who sold it to me, and I keep calling him the guy, I can't remember his name 35 years later, but I think he wanted to sell it to a Randy fan too. And I think seeing this 17-year-old with his haircut, playing Randy licks on the guitar, falling all over myself,
right.
He almost made it easy for me in that he traded it to me for gear that we had in the shop. It was a Neil Sean Les Paul and a Roland Jazz Chorus. And that bought me this guitar all those years ago. And, I always knew, even then, I knew it was an investment. I thought I'm never going to sell it, but if I have to, I figured it would probably appreciate somewhat, and I'm sure that it has, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something guitar players, I think, always talk about, sort of a peanut gallery kind of thing, is like, somebody who's maybe a collector, they buy a guitar and they don't necessarily appreciate the guitar for what it is, right?
Sure.
But you've had this guitar And like you said, I mean, you're a huge Randy fan. I mean, even back then you were. Right?
Well, and so I bought it as a player, not as a collector, right? And
Right.
so it had years and years of hard playing, for sure. I did retire the guitar some years ago, so it's been sitting in its case for a long time now. But I think you're alluding to the fact that I would much rather see this go to a player than a collector.
Right.
Or at least a collector player, if there's such a thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
And because, and I've said this many times about this guitar, and I just said it, it wants to be played. From the moment I held it in my hands, it's just calling to me. I was talking to you guys earlier about doing the bidextral tapping.
Yeah.
I remember playing this, trying to play Eddie Van Halen, going all the way up the neck, going, wow, there's no guitar in the world that I can do this on, you know? And so what's special about it, and we'll talk about this, but it's the design. It's Randy Rhoads' design. He wanted a player's guitar that he could sound from one end of the note to the very highest note without any effort or...
Yeah, it's a guitar that doesn't get in your way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that he insisted on, was even more access up here. And so just right to the last drop. I love it.
And just to clarify, you did gigs with this guitar.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
I did.
So
and recordings.
Did people in the audience know what it was?
Very rarely.
Okay.
Remember, I was telling you guys a little story earlier about I had a scare when I was a young guitar player. My bass player hid the guitar from me, and it put the fear of God in me, right? Yeah, with bass players, darn bass players. But it put the fear of God in me, and so I almost never let the guitar out of my sight after that, you know?
Yeah. So one thing that I just keep thinking about, this is such an important piece of history, but in more than one way.
Yeah.
Because first of all, obviously the connection to Randy Rhoads is massive.
Right.
But this is one of the first Jackson guitars ever.
Right.
And Jackson Jackson Guitars, the brand, went on to be such an important brand.
And it still is. And, we have to come back to the design because from what I remember hearing and seeing in interviews and stuff, Randy designed the guitar and would come back and do little tweaks. Oh, and he had two other Jacksons. The first one was too big. The second black one was closer to this one, but he still was tweaking things. Again, elongating the neck, more access here, mahogany wings, strings through the body. These are some of these things are on the other guitar. The angled neck stock, headstock.
Right.
On this particular guitar, backwards inlays.
Backwards inlays, that's right.
If you look at the back, you can see the maple, 5 plies of maple going through, and mahogany wings, which
you can just see the lines in the finish.
Just see the lines in the finish if you look carefully. So many neat things. I've often mentioned the signature on the top. It's not a decal.
Right.
Those kinds of things make it special. And although I have the original pickups over here, these are not the original pickups, I will say, for the camera, but these are the same pickups because before it was cool, this guitar came loaded with Seymour Duncan pickups for Randy Rhoads.
Right, yeah.
Way before it was cool. And by the way, provenance of this guitar is very, very strong, but it first happened in the 1997 Guitar World article. My girlfriend and I sent pictures to people at Jackson who contacted Grover directly.
Right.
Next thing I know, I have Grover Jackson on the phone. I want to buy that guitar, sell me the guitar. And soon after, I was at Jackson with Mike Shannon, that I'm in the guitar or the Jackson catalog. So the provenance is strong.
But you weren't going to sell it.
But that's what I was trying to figure out how to say. I didn't want to sell the guitar back to Grover or ever sell it.
Yeah.
Until now.
It's tough to say no to Grover Jackson, but you did.
I did, and that was tough, because he's a quasi-hero of mine, I guess you could say.
Sure, yeah. Now, you mentioned early on, you're a huge Randy fan, obviously.
Absolutely.
And back in the day, how did it feel to play Randy riffs, stuff off of those first 2 albums?
God-given, unbelievable, dude. Playing Diary of a Madman or any Sato, any Randy riff. It just felt like I'm home. This is right. This belongs here.
Yeah.
I know this guitar didn't make that music, but the design and
Yeah. Well,
I have to go back to the Stradivarius.
The guy who was doing the design of the guitar, he made the music. So
exactly
this is the
right.
guitar that he would have wanted to use to play that music.
I felt completely at home, like it belonged there. It belonged in my hands, and that music belonged coming out of this guitar for sure.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. And God, I remember working on the hardest solos, Revelation, Mother Earth, or even Sato was a hard one. So many of those. I think I learned every solo from those 2 records back in the day. I was that big a fan. But this guitar helped. It made it easy. It's like, oh, I'm not struggling on my fake Stratocaster. I got a real Jackson. Oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. So I've felt that luck in all my life. You know,
as guitar players, we always talk about like, oh, I'm going to get a new piece of gear, get a new guitar, and it's going to motivate me, right? And all this inspiration.
Sure.
But I can't imagine having a more perfect guitar to then sit down and learn those riffs.
I was thinking about it earlier because I have like 4D guitars in my collection, right? Like, how do you have this and then have 4D other guitars? But yes, no, funny enough, I always knew that this guitar beat all the other ones by miles, especially those old Ibanez's, and I must have broken a few of those. Well, this kept licking and kept on ticking, if you know what I mean. So,
sure,
I've played it on a bunch of recordings, but I have toured with it very little because I just was so scared. I don't want to get stolen. I want to get scratched.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you.
Yeah,
I don't blame you at all. Yeah.
In a little bit, I regret not having toured as much on it.
Right.
But it just is what it is. So, it definitely made it on albums and stuff, and so I'm happy. I had a career and I had my time with it, like you said.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, the guitar has obviously been getting a lot of press lately. There's a new Guitar World article coming out about it, and all these videos and everything. And it is an undeniable piece of heavy metal history, man. And, congratulations.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you being a part of it.
Yeah, being the owner.
Helping me talk about it. And speaking of luck, just from the day I got it, I knew how lucky I was, and so I've kept it in my back pocket. Oh, I've got the most incredible guitar maybe on the face of the earth,
Yeah.
And it's mine. Well, it's soon to be someone else's, so good luck, anybody. This is the piece. Probably the best playing guitar you'll ever hold in your hands. The best playing guitar I ever held in my hands. So there you have it.
Excellent. Well, dude, thanks a ton for taking the time to talk.
Appreciate it. No problem at all.
Yep. Okay, guys, so I can't tell you how lucky I feel to be able to play this guitar and spend some time shredding on it, but I got to give a huge shout out to Warren over at the Produce Like a Pro channel for collabing on this series of videos, and then also the website where you can go and place a bid on this incredible guitar, Analoger. I'm going to have a link for that down in the video description below, as well as Warren's video and pretty much everything else I was talking about in the video. So guys, I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have any questions about it, let me know what you think of this guitar down in the comment section below. Let me know how much you would pay for this guitar. Let's say if you have like $10 million in the bank and you just don't have to worry about money, how much would you personally pay for this guitar? Randy Rhoads Lost Guitar. All right, guys, thanks a ton for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you soon.